Hi everyone, Samir and Samet here, and welcome back to our Formula One podcast.
Today we'll be previewing the 2023 season and reviewing the car launches that have happened so far.
Yeah, so obviously, as you guys can see, we've moved our podcast to YouTube as well, but we've also have our phone here, so we're still recording on Anchor. So you'll still be able to access our podcast from Spotify, Anchor, Apple Music. So it's essentially the same places, but just YouTube as well.
So now going on to the car launches that have happened so far, we'll start off with Haas F1. Their car launch was really nice to watch, especially the build up and the anticipation of what their new cars would look like. Haas have been changing up their liveries recently so far, so it was really like hype to see what it might be, and their livery did not disappoint. It was almost like they flipped a dark mode switch. They have now dark gray contrasting the previous 2 years of just plain white. The dark gray now and some of the black with that red really pops out, and I really think it looks really nice.
Yeah, I agree too. And it's just like symbolizing a new era almost for the team because now they've got a new driver lineup of Kevin Magnussen and the returning Nico Hulkenberg as well. Hulkenberg not being a full-time driver since 2019, and now he's back with Haas. So it's going to be really exciting to see how they're going to perform now. And obviously, they have the new sponsorship of MoneyGram. So that's bringing a lot of money into the team. And it's going to be like now maybe they can fight for even more points and consistent top 10 finishes. Last year, they made a really good step forward. They finished eighth, I think it was, in the Constructors' Championship after their really disappointing season of 2021 and kind of 2020. But now it's going to be really exciting to see how they're going to perform in 2022.
I think the car also is going to be really good this year. I mean, you could see on their show car they had at the car launch, they had the new side pods similar to like Scuderia Ferrari. Their side pods, they had kind of the curved edge side pods that like started out really wide and then swooped back in. And it looked like maybe it would be a really nice aero upgrade considering it worked pretty well for Ferrari last year. So it's nice to see Haas bringing some upgrades during this off season, and also their drivers too. Two really experienced and fast drivers, Nico Hulkenberg and Kevin Magnussen. While they have had their rivalry, like we saw in Hungary 2017, they do now say they can work pretty well together. And if they do work well together, they can deliver really good points. Both drivers are known for extracting a lot out of their car. Like Hulkenberg, while he has never gotten a podium in Formula One, he gets consistent top 10 finishes, and consistent points finishes are exactly what Haas needs at this stage.
Yeah, I completely agree too. Gunter Steiner will be counting on both of his drivers to put their differences aside and to just maximum attack on the track to bring in the points. So now moving on to the next car launch, which was just earlier today in New York. It was Red Bull Racing who unveiled their 2023 Challenger, the RB19. And my thoughts on the livery is that it's more or less the same from last year. I noticed that they got rid of Puma as their kit sponsor. They brought in a new sponsor too. Really like the new suits, but in terms of the actual like livery on the car, it's basically the same thing.
Yeah, Red Bull opting for the if it's not broken, don't fix it type of motto going into this 2023 season. I mean, coming off of a really, really dominant season, reminiscent of 2013, also where they dominated the second half of the season. It was really interesting to watch that season. I mean, Ferrari had no chance both in 2013 and in 2022. So Red Bull just keeping it simple. They've got two fast drivers, Max Verstappen and Sergio Perez, and in case they ever need to, now they have the always fast Daniel Ricciardo now returning home to Red Bull Racing. It was really fun to watch him in the car launch. It was so nice to see him back in Red Bull colors, and he just brings a new overall happiness back to Red Bull after he left. It's the same thing now. He came back. Everyone likes him here, and he's making Red Bull his home again.
Yeah, and also Red Bull with their livery. It's like, as we know, it's minor aerodynamic upgrades that are technically the only reg changes for this season. So Red Bull kind of the cars are kind of staying the same. So why doesn't their livery just stay the same too? I bet that's what they're thinking because they had such good luck with their last year's livery and they really dominated the season. So that's what they're gonna try and do this year. Obviously, they haven't won championships in a while since 2021, so now they're trying to now continue dominating in the way they have. And there's no reason for them not to. They still have their drivers. If the cars aren't changing a lot, then their car is looking really good, obviously, from the end of last season. But it's just going to be um, time will tell whether or not Ferrari couldn't catch up. Maybe they'll have new strategy. They'll have good strategies, or whether Mercedes can develop a really good car and catch up from where they were last season.
Yeah, and obviously the big announcement at the Red Bull car launch is that we'd see that Red Bull would stop using Honda powertrains in 2026 and switch to Ford. Yeah, Ford is coming back into Formula One with the Red Bull Racing, and it's going to be really interesting to watch in 2026. Obviously, that big shakeup of new aerodynamics, new teams entering like Ford and Audi as a works team. So Ford coming back with Red Bull is like it'll be a new life to Red Bull, and we'll have to see. We'll have to wait. Time will tell if Ford can continue the Red Bull dominance we're seeing now.
Yeah, so now moving on to another team now that we're going to preview, it's Williams Racing. And obviously, it's one of the teams I'm really excited to look forward to this season because they have Alex Albon returning as their driver, but then they also have a rookie now. The American Logan Sargent will finally get his chance in F1 after a really good season in Formula 2 last year. He finished fourth in the championship with 2 wins, 4 podiums, 2 pole positions. He was the best rookie. He was the highest finishing rookie. He just missed out on third place by 1 point, but he's a really good driver, and it'll be exciting to see how he's going to perform against Alex Albon, who of course did really well in his return to F1 last season. So, but also in terms of their management too, their team principal Jost Capito is now out, and it's the former Mercedes man James Vowles, who's going to come in as their team principal. So it'll be exciting to see if he can bring his Mercedes experience into Williams and to make them fight at the front again.
I think it's a new life into Williams. Obviously, they've been struggling the past few years, but recently I think they've been on a small but so slowly, steadily upward curve. I think they're going back up towards the grid. They've had a lot of fights like last season. They had a lot of points finishes with Nicholas Latifi and Alex Albon, but Albon doing most of the work. But I think Logan Sargent, the fresh new young rookie from Miami, he's gonna really bring a chance now for Williams maybe to go further up the grid. And as you said before, James Vowles coming into Mercedes, that'll be a really big boost in their management. Obviously, working with 8-time constructors champions, you have to have a lot of experience coming
Yep.
to a new team with that.
Yeah. So yeah, Williams obviously finished last season, but obviously now with their new driver lineups, their new management, new season, maybe they can just have new life into the team. And obviously Logan Sargent too is an academy driver. He's been working with the team since the USGP in 2021 and all of last season, obviously. So he knows the team really well. He won't have to go through that phase of getting to know the team like some other drivers like Fernando Alonso will have to, and maybe Nick DeFries as well, and certainly Oscar Piastri. But because Sargent is already very familiar with the team, so he's gonna know the team a lot. He already has his seat. It's gonna be exciting to see him.
Yep. Now moving on to the next team, Alfa Romeo, keeping the same lineup, Valtteri Bottas and Zhou Guanyu. But we also heard during this offseason that in 2026 they're going to be bought out by Audi, and this Alfa Romeo Sauber team is going to become the Audi Works team. So these two drivers will really be wanting to prove themselves to Audi to see if they want to retain them. I mean, otherwise Audi might look somewhere out. Maybe they'll want to bring like more German drivers into Formula One. And who knows, maybe could be a return to Formula One for Sebastian Vettel, 4-time world champion. I mean, we saw Michael Schumacher return with a German manufacturer.
Yeah, and also Mick Schumacher too as well. Obviously, we know he's a Mercedes reserve driver now after what was more or less a decent season for him at Haas and him losing out his job for 2023. So Audi also have him to look forward to if they when they come into the sport because Mick Schumacher's still young, so he has a lot of time ahead of him.
Yep. So with Alfa Romeo now, I mean, they had a really good season last year. They've been a consistent midfield team with these new reg changes from 2022. And with that new experience from Valtteri Bottas, the Grand Prix winner at Mercedes, he really took Alfa Romeo to a whole nother level this year. I mean, scoring a lot of points. And the rookie Zhou Guanyu, he did a really incredible job. I mean, scoring points on his Formula One debut. We saw that last year as well with Yuki Tsunoda, and that must have been really special for both those drivers scoring points on their debut. But that just really like gave them a whole boost for the season. Basically, they had so much momentum coming off of Bahrain. They sort of carried that with them throughout the year. They've had a few reliability issues, so maybe in 2023 we'll see them hopefully iron those issues out and get better reliability. Because with that, they can really go much further up the constructors championship if they keep getting those top performances without reliability failure.
Yeah, but also their team principal, Fred Vasseur, he's left Alfa Romeo now and he's off to Ferrari. So it's gonna be like it's a guessing game now to see whether they can still perform well even with the loss of their team principal. They have a new team principal now that'll have to get familiar with the team. But Valtteri Bottas and Zhou Guanyu, as you said, are still really good drivers, and they're still determined to bring Alfa Romeo back to the podium.
Yep, Alfa Romeo announcing also that it wasn't really a new team principal role per se. It was like sort of a team advisor or team manager kind of. It's basically a team principal, though I really don't see any difference between the roles they established that person would have versus a regular team principal. I mean, I really don't think they should have called it a team manager or something. It should have just been another team principal.
Yeah, that is true. So
So
now moving on to the next team, then Scuderia Ferrari. Obviously, their 2022 season is something I think everyone remembers. Started off the year really strongly with a win in Bahrain and a 1-2 with Leclerc ahead of Sainz. Then they also got a second place and a double podium in Saudi Arabia. Then Leclerc won in Australia, and their season was just going uphill, and then it all came crashing down, and then Red Bull ran away with the title. So Ferrari, with their bad strategies, obviously that have been notorious throughout 2022, with now Fred Vasseur as their team principal, Matteo Binotto is now out of Ferrari, and Fred Vasseur is taking over as team principal. So now hopefully they'll have some better strategy calls, some just a better running of the team in general, because Leclerc and Sainz are obviously really young drivers who are still like just barely into their careers of how long they could go. So they have every right to leave the team if they want to, if the team is not performing to the way they want.
yep, I fully agree with that. Leclerc and Sainz still pretty young. They can bring Ferrari back to the top in their championship winning days. They can bring Ferrari back to those days. But Leclerc and Sainz both need to fix some mistakes. I mean, we've seen mistakes from Sainz, like Imola wasn't really his fault, but also he could have been more situationally aware. But then like Australia, completely on him. He just went too fast and just spun out by himself. But
France.
Leclerc, on the other hand, in France, like he spun out by himself. Like there's no question about it. If he wants to win championships, he cannot be making mistakes like that. But it's not just him. I mean, Ferrari really need to fix their situation with reliability, and especially, oh my God, their strategy calls. I mean, some of their strategy calls have been just completely, quite frankly, horrendous. I mean, how do you expect a team like Ferrari to be making such strategy blunders like that? Just blows my mind. And then their reliability, I mean, woeful reliability.
Yeah, exactly. Especially in Hungary too, when literally every team was complaining about the hard tires, and they was like saying, "Don't go onto the hard tires." The drivers were complaining about that, and yet they still put their Ferrari still put their drivers on the hard tires. That didn't make any sense.
And then in Brazil, they put Leclerc on intermediates. Everyone else was on softs. They even put their other driver Sainz on soft, and then they decide to put Leclerc on inters. I mean, I don't even know sometimes what was going on with Ferrari. They didn't even look like an F1 team, let alone what kind of F1 team they are. I mean, just the records they have, it wouldn't do justice this season to those.
Yeah, and especially as you said, the reliability. In Azerbaijan, we saw the engine go up. This in Spain as well, and most famously in Austria when Sainz's car like practically exploded, which was not only like it ruined their race, it's also a safety hazard because the car was also rolling downhill, and to have a literal explosion of the engine. Yes, it was a small one, but it was still an explosion. It still just blows my mind how a team like Ferrari can let that happen.
And speaking of the cars like rolling down the hills, that was kind of on the marshals. I mean, they should have run to the scene more quickly. Like, yes, the car's on fire, but also there's a person in there too. So you need to get that car stopped and extinguish that fire quicker. And that brings me around to the topic of the FIA and their management. Like last season, I mean, they had new people in charge, like race directors, but also like their point system was like pretty screwed up sometimes. I mean, in Japan, after that really weird race, reminiscent of Belgium 2021, I mean, Verstappen didn't even know he won the championship. Like, how do you not know you win the championship after you win it? I mean, you want to be celebrating a championship. You want to know that you win it. Like, he had people telling him he won it. He had people telling him he didn't win it. He just didn't know what to think. Like someone told him he was world champion. He was like, "No, I don't believe that. I don't think I am. I missed out by 1 point, right?" And then people said, "No, he is." And then he found out he was champion. So the FIA need to really iron those issues out and make sure they're consistent with their point scoring, safety car deployment, marshal management, etc. To make sure that all the fans have the best experience, but also all the drivers and teams.
Yeah, adding to that point too, also, in terms of how quickly they deploy the penalties out. Obviously, we remember from Singapore, they delayed it till after the race to call out that penalty. So Perez couldn't really like fully enjoy his podium because he knew there was a chance that it could have been taken away from him.
Yeah,
Whereas we go to Japan and the penalty is given out almost immediately. Like there
that's
has to be
true.
consistency there, especially in a season where the cars and the field is just getting closer and closer. The battles are getting more intense. It just has to become more consistent.
Yeah. So now moving on to the next team to discuss, it's the other Scuderia. It's the little Scuderia. It's Alpha Tauri with their new driver lineup, Yuki Tsunoda and the new rookie Nick De Vries, the 2019 Formula 2 champion and the 2021 Formula E world champion. It's really exciting to see De Vries coming into Formula 1 for the first time. After obviously in Italy in 2022, we saw his debut and it was a really great performance. I mean, out qualifying Latifi and scoring points on his debut. I mean, I don't think Latifi had even scored points at all that season, and De
Yeah.
Vries managed to do it on his first run in a Formula One car on his Formula One weekend. He raced for two teams that weekend, Aston Martin and then Williams, and it was a really funny story actually of how he got the contract. I mean, he was talking with Max Verstappen after that weekend, and apparently Verstappen told him like, you should talk to Helmut Marko, the Red Bull Junior driver director. He said you should talk to him and see if there's anything he can do. So De Vries called him, asked him if there was like any way he could get involved with that potential Alpha Tauri seat after it was like rumored that Pierre Gasly would be leaving. And Helmut Marko did look into it, and now here we are, De Vries, Alpha Tauri Formula One driver. It's going to be so interesting to see him.
Yeah, and also surprisingly, it's very hard to wrap my mind around the fact that now Yuki Tsunoda is the team leader technically at Alpha Tauri, even though it's just his second season in or third season in F1 now, and he's already the team leader at Alpha Tauri. And but he also has some mistakes of his to clean up. He's done a much better job at his anger management. That was a really big issue in 2021. He's become a really mature driver as well. But he didn't really have a lot to show last season just because of how bad, to be honest, how bad the AlphaTauri car was last season. I mean, they finished ninth in the championship, and it was a really disappointing season. So hopefully they get their act together and turn it around, especially because Red Bull is their sister team too, the team that won both championships last season. So hopefully they're able to bounce back to where they were in 2021.
I think AlphaTauri have a lot of potential with these two young drivers. I mean, it looks like De Vries can really easily adapt to new cars. I mean, we saw him win the Formula 2 championship in 2019, And then like just 2 years later, he won the Formula E World Championship. I mean, a Formula 2 car and a Formula E car are completely different cars. You drive them completely different ways. So the fact that De Vries was not only able to get up to speed with a car in 2 years, he was able to win the world championship in Formula E. So I think he'll be able to get used to a Formula One car. I mean, he scored points on his debut in a Formula One car. So I think it's going to be really interesting to see how De Vries develops and improves over time. And then Yuki Tsunoda, we've always known him to be really fast, but I think with his anger management being controlled down, he'll be able to focus more, and that obviously leads to quicker lap times, which can lead to more points for AlphaTauri in general.
Yeah, so now moving on to the next team, Aston Martin, and that's another really exciting team to look forward to because obviously Sebastian Vettel is retired from Formula One, leaving a seat open there, and it's gone to Fernando Alonso, shockingly, the two-time world champion, is going to Aston Martin for the first time in his career. And it's going to be really cool to see how he puts up with Stroll because obviously Vettel had to deal with a lot of Lance Stroll's shenanigans, but Vettel is a really calm driver now. So I bet Prime Vettel wouldn't have taken any of that, but now he's really mature after he left Ferrari. So he was more calm about the situation. But Alonso, on the other hand, we've seen how he's dealt with Esteban Ocon. So he's definitely not gonna take Stroll's shenanigans that lightly. He's gonna be pissed off about it. He's gonna voice his concerns.
That's true. That's very true.
Yeah. So is and also now Aston Martin too. It's now their third season coming into F1 now, and still they have a lot to prove about what type of team they are. They have a lot of money, as we know, because Aston Martin is a big company, and they still haven't gotten the results that anyone was expecting.
Yeah, I mean, these past 2 years for Aston Martin, they've just been quite frankly woeful. I mean, they brought in four-time world champion Sebastian Vettel. I think he extracted as much as he could out of that car, honestly. I mean, he was outperforming Stroll consistently at
Yep.
almost every race. I mean, there was not a lot to get out of that car. I mean, granted, they did get a podium in Azerbaijan and technically Hungary, even though it got revoked from him.
Yep.
He's managed to show that Aston Martin does have potential, and we'll see. I bet we'll see Alonso extract a lot of it out of that Aston Martin. I have no doubt he's going to out qualify Lance Stroll at almost every race. Alonso just knows how to extract everything out of his cars. Even looking back to the woeful McLaren days, the McLaren Honda days, he still managed to extract as much as he could out of those cars.
Yeah, and also in terms of their driver academy, they have the Formula 2 champion Felipe Drugovich as their reserve driver too. So I'm sure he's going to be doing a lot of sim work as well to try to get the car in the direction that they want it to be. So they have now a really good driver in their back pocket.
Yeah, I mean, while they do have that driver, I think just Aston Martin's whole like philosophy behind their driver lineup, it's kind of like bizarre. I mean, there's really added time only ever going to be one seat in contention at
That's
Aston
true,
Martin.
yeah.
I mean, Lance Stroll, it's like it makes Aston Martin almost look like a joke, kind of like one driver just gets his seat because his father owns a lot of that company. I mean, so he's always gonna keep that seat. We saw it at Williams. I mean, when his father was one of big investor at Williams, Stroll had that seat. They moved to at the time Racing Point. Stroll went and got that seat. So like it just makes Aston Martin look like a joke with just one seat in contention, especially with such a strong young driver.
Yeah, but let's not forget to Lance Stroll. On his day, he's actually a really good driver. He has a pole position, three podiums. He is really good in the wet. So it's just a matter of if he can bring that performance to the dry as well.
Yeah. So now going on to the next team, we have McLaren after having a pretty like dismal 2022 season, starting off really bad in Bahrain. Both Ricardo and Norris finishing out of the points. Ricardo's performances continued to get worse, and then McLaren decided to drop him early instead of at the end of 2023, at the end of 2022. And so in place they signed after that whole fiasco between Alpine and McLaren. They won the bidding war and they signed Oscar Piastri. So it's Piastri and Norris, their driver lineup. And it's a really fast lineup. I mean, Norris has already proven himself in that McLaren, getting multiple podiums, consistently out qualifying Daniel Ricciardo. But Oscar Piastri, 2020 Formula 3 champion, 2021 Formula 2 champion. He had to sit 2022 on the sidelines, but everyone knew how fast of a driver he was. I mean, he won Formula 3 and Formula 2 both in his rookie years. That's really impressive, and that shows that a driver really has a lot of potential. I mean, we've seen drivers like Charles Leclerc, George Russell, Formula 3, Formula 2 champions. Like, look at where they are now. Russell at Mercedes, Leclerc, Ferrari, both of them really fast. So Piastri definitely has a lot of potential.
Yeah, I completely agree as well. It's also one of the another teams. Every team is gonna be exciting to look out for, but especially the teams with the rookies and new driver transfers. It's gonna be really exciting to see. So
And
now moving on to the next.
I was gonna say, like, I mean, McLaren also with their new team principal Andreas Seidel leaving to become the CEO of the Sauber Group, is
Yep.
they promoted Andreas Stella into their team principal role, and it's gonna be interesting to see how he gets along with that now, bringing that new energy as team principal. I mean, Andreas Seidel, he's improved McLaren a lot, and I think Zach Brown has too. So the direction McLaren are going seem to be like really good, and they seem to be up on the chart again.
Yeah, so now moving on to the next theme of discussion, Alpine, and one of the really good driver lineups to watch out for, Esteban Ocon and Pierre Gasly, both two Frenchmen at a French-based team, except they haven't had the greatest of relationships between each other. They've really hated each other in the past, but now they don't really hate each other anymore, as on Instagram and on social media, they've been posting pictures with each other. They're friends with each other. They went to an NBA game together. So hopefully now, because both of them are really, really quick now, they're gonna only be valuable to Alpine.
Yeah, I think while the other teams have a lot of young drivers, I feel like Alpine's combination is like pretty optimal. Like both drivers are neither like too young, but they're neither like too old. They're like in that optimal prime zone where they're like as fast as I've ever been so far. And
Yep.
Alpine's car, while it always wasn't good last season, they are on the up, I think. I mean, they have really good potential for this year's car, both Ocon and Gasly. They can get a lot out of the cars they drive. While Gasly has had struggles in 2022, I think 2023 will be a refresher for him after, Gasly's up and down career, racing for Toro Rosso and then getting promoted to Red Bull only to get dropped back down, staying with Toro Rosso as they rebranded to Alpha Tauri. Now he's completely left the Red Bull family to join Alpine, the French team, as a French national himself. So it's going to be really interesting to watch Alpine. I mean, they've been known like last year. Oh my God, Esteban Ocon and Fernando Alonso were like they hated each other. I mean, that rivalry
Yep.
between them was probably the most intense teammate rivalry of the year. Just the way they battled on track with each other, and then like the fact that they hated each other when they got into battles. It was just like it was pretty funny to watch, to be honest.
Yeah, especially in Brazil too. I think Brazil was like the point where Alonso just like he was done at that point after Ocon like cut him off and broke his front wing. I think like that was really funny to watch, but I'm pretty sure it wasn't funny if you watched Alpine.
Yeah. I think Alpine though they'll get these issues sorted out so far. I mean Ocon and Gasly, I think they're like really good to watch together. They seem to not hate each other anymore. And I feel like that just only helps the team because with them working together, it boosts the team and Alpine can get those consistent like midfield points and they can battle with McLaren again. And who knows, maybe other teams for best of the rest.
Yeah, so now moving on to the next team of discussion, it's Mercedes, the 8-time constructor champions, 7-time drivers champions with their lineup from last year, same lineup of Lewis Hamilton and George Russell. And they had a well, looked like a decent season, but in terms of if you're Mercedes, it was a pretty bad season, finishing third in the championship, with only one win at that season, but like multiple podiums as well. So it was still like not really a good season for them, but they did in the second half of the season come back.
Yeah, I think it just shows though how Mercedes are like off track. They're just really motivated and they push for perfection. I mean, they're 8-time constructors world champions for a reason, just the way they consistently push and like while their car was like really bad at the beginning of the years, those porpoising issues we saw at every race. I mean, Lewis Hamilton in Saudi Arabia was a miserable race for him. They bounced back and now look at Sao Paulo. I mean, they won the race. They got a 1-2. Who would have thought that at the beginning of the year? I mean, so it was just really showed how hard they worked throughout the season, how they pushed for perfection. And while their car wasn't good, they managed to overturn it really quickly and they turned it into good results. And they almost got second place in the Constructors' Championship behind Ferrari.
Yeah, so now they have like a good foundation to build their car upon, and they have like they ended it last season really strongly. So they now they were just simply quicker than Ferrari at the end of last season. If it wasn't for Ferrari's domination at the beginning, Mercedes would have easily taken second place.
I think it just also shows too, like, I mean, Mercedes, they were quick, but it just shows how bad Ferrari did at the second half of the
That's true.
season.
That's true.
I mean, they just completely like threw the bottle away at the end of the season. I mean, Mercedes, they became so fast, but then Ferrari, they were faster than Mercedes at a lot of races. It's just the fact their reliability, driver mistakes, bad strategy calls, just everything cumulatively came together and it just didn't look like a team that was capable of challenging Red Bull. And I feel like that's another reason why Red Bull were able to run away with the championship. Like they just kept sticking together. Like they always pushed for perfection while
Yep.
Ferrari were like they didn't seem to push as hard as they could. While their drivers they did work well together. It just looked like the driver and management wasn't just together. Whereas Red Bull, it seemed like everything was flowing as one big, continuous, well-oiled machine.
Yep, that's true. So obviously now that's all the teams, but we've now discussed every team, and there's a lot to look forward to this season. It's going to be a really interesting season. Hopefully, we have a much tighter championship battle, more similar to something we saw in 2021. But yeah, hopefully it's a really good season. Now we have three U.S. Races there. The addition of Las Vegas now. Hopefully that brings a good race, and yeah, the calendar looks good, and the drivers look good, and the cars hopefully are gonna be deliveries will look good because we still have a lot of car launches left, and hopefully we get a much closer field spread.
I think it'll be really interesting season to watch. I mean, the fact that F1's grown so much in popularity. Now there's been 3 US races now. It just shows how much Formula One has grown in the United States. And now with the addition of American driver Logan Sargent, I think it's just better news for Formula One in America. And it's going to be really fun to watch this season.
Yep. So thank you guys for listening to this episode. Hopefully you guys like this new YouTube format because we certainly do. And you guys will still be able to check out our episodes though in the same places as before. So thank you for listening to this episode, and be sure to join us next time as we continue to look at the 2023 season. Thank you.